Is that correct?
Well, their reports are sent to the head of the agency and to Congress.
I know. That's what he left me with.
There are often follow-up reports. Sometimes they have recommendations. Sometimes the IGs actually can arrest people too. So sometimes there are arrests and they lead to prosecutions. Their recommendations are not always acted on. I mean, Congress is the watchdog there to ensure that the agency acts on those recommendations if they feel that they are correct.
Well, with respect to your first question, Senator, I think that it's important to note that the Inspector General did do an extensive report and made recommendations and identified problems. When I arrived at ATF in September of 2011, as I mentioned, it was an agency very much in distress, and the first thing that I did was go to the Phoenix Field Division and visit sort of the ground zero for a lot of the controversy that evolved. But one of the first things that I did was look at who was in positions of responsibility, who was in leadership positions, and there's been a number of changes. None of the individuals who are identified in leadership positions during the Fast and Furious incident are currently in place. We have, as I mentioned, 22 new special agents in charge. We have a number of assistant directors, 6 out of the 8 assistant directors who help me as a team lead ATF are new, and all of them have experience as former special agents in charge. We are continuously in the process of implementing and following through and executing on many of their recommendations made in the IG's report, but we didn't wait for the IG's report to come out. We knew that there was a failure in leadership and oversight. One of the first things we did was issue and clarify our firearms transfer policy, with the underpinnings being that public safety always trumps investigative needs. We've reviewed our undercover order. We've reviewed our confidential informant order. We've instituted and continue to exercise a monitored case program. But these are just some of the internal fixes. More than anything else, I think it was important to keep the agency's eye on what its underlying mission is, which is public safety. Because ATF plays such a critical role within the Department of Justice in the fight against violent crime, in the explosives arena, in the arson arena, and it's important that we do not have public safety suffer as a result of continuous critical examination.
Okay. Let me go to another subject quickly, and that's liability protection. And you talked to us a little bit about what the liability protection standard should be in a bill. There are 2 parts of it. One is for use of a government countermeasure, and the other is voluntary information sharing between 2 companies. I think many members feel companies won't share unless they have immunity from liability. Could you comment on that?
So the 2 different aspects, as you stated, and one is how do you share with the government and what action do you take? And so here's where I think my personal thoughts on this are that if the government asks the company to do something to protect the networks or to do something and a mistake is made and it was our fault, then they should have liability protection for that. And they shouldn't stand up and have to be sued. So I think there is a case for that. But if they go company to company, or if they're sharing data back and forth as they do today, I'm not sure that the government needs to provide liability insurance that way. So I think there's 2 different things. Now this is something that I think the administration, your folks, and we ought to bring everybody together if that's the key point and iron that out. I think we want to get it right. There are subtleties to what we just said. So there are different cases and conditions upon when we would act and how we'd act and what level of liability you would have. And so I think those are the ones that we truly got to get exactly right. From my perspective, we just can't grant everybody gets liability protection. And on the other hand, we don't want to say do something for the government and if it goes bad, you're on your own. So I think there's something in the middle there that we have to get right. And from my perspective is when the government's asking them to do something, we ought to have at least part of that liability protection.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all so much for being here. I do have some questions about the situation we're in, but I think what I'd like to do is wait until we get into the classified. I think you've said about as much as you could say in a setting like this. I do think that the senator from Nebraska, though, raised an important consideration that we're probably not talking about enough. I think by any standards, this is a very far-reaching program that really does have tremendous implication to the general public. And having the military, and as he said, your record is exemplary. You're a tremendous American. My dad did 20 years active duty, and I'll do anything I can to help you all in that regard. But I do think that the idea of having military control, we've had those firewalls in the past, and that is a discussion at some point that I think we need to have. And